They laughed when Claire Bennett hit the mat. 10 seconds later, nobody in that dojo could even look her in the eyes. The afternoon rain tapped softly against the tall windows of Iron Crest Martial Arts Academy, while the scent of sweat, old wood, and disinfectant lingered in the air like a permanent part of the building itself. Inside the crowded dojo, students in crisp white uniforms moved across the blue training mats beneath bright fluorescent lights, while instructors barked corrections with military sharpness. Heavy punching bags swung gently in the corner. Gloves slapped against focus pads in rhythmic bursts. The walls were lined with framed tournament photos, black belts, and faded newspaper clippings celebrating decades of local champions. It was the kind of place that demanded respect the moment someone stepped through the doors. And when Claire Bennett quietly entered the building that Tuesday evening, nobody offered her any. At 41, Claire carried herself with calm restraint, though there was something unusually measured about the way she moved. Her faded gray hoodie hung loosely over a plain t-shirt, and her old gym bag looked like it had survived years of neglect. A few damp strands of light brown hair clung near her cheeks from the rain outside, while her tired sneakers squeaked faintly against the polished floor. She paused just inside the doorway, scanning the room with quiet eyes that revealed absolutely nothing. The younger students barely noticed her. The older ones noticed immediately and dismissed her just as quickly. She looked ordinary. Too ordinary for a place like Iron Crest. Across the room, head instructor Derek Vaughn stood with his arms folded over his broad chest, while two advanced students demonstrated sparring combinations near the center mat. At 46, Derek carried the swagger of a man who had spent most of his life being admired inside rooms exactly like this one. His black belt rested perfectly against his pressed uniform, and every movement he made seemed carefully designed to remind others who controlled the space. Beside him stood assistant instructor Tyler Reed, younger, louder, and far too eager to imitate Derek's arrogance. Tyler noticed Claire first. His lips curled slightly before he leaned closer to Derek and muttered something that made both men smirk. Claire walked toward the front desk calmly. "Excuse me," she said softly to the teenage receptionist. "I called earlier about joining classes." Before the girl could answer, Derek stepped forward. "You're the walk-in?" he asked, glancing her up and down openly. Claire nodded once. "Claire Bennett." Derek's eyes settled briefly on her worn sneakers before returning to her face. "This isn't cardio kickboxing," he said flatly. "We run serious training here." Several nearby students chuckled under their breath. Claire remained still. "I understand." Tyler walked a slow circle around her like he was inspecting damaged equipment. "You got any experience?" he asked. "A little," Claire answered. Tyler laughed immediately. "A little," he repeated loudly enough for others to hear. "That usually means YouTube videos and one free trial class." More laughter spread across the room. Claire ignored it. Derek tilted his head slightly. "What belt?" "It's been a long time," Claire replied carefully. "I'm mostly looking to train again." Derek exchanged another amused glance with Tyler. "So no belt." Claire said nothing. The silence somehow made Tyler more irritated. "Lady," he said with a grin. "People get hurt in here if they don't know what they're doing." Claire looked directly at him for the first time. Calm. Steady. Impossible to read. "I'll be careful." Something about the way she said it made Tyler's smile twitch for half a second. Then it returned sharper than before. "Cute," he muttered. Around them, training had slowed as students subtly gathered closer, sensing entertainment. Claire could feel their eyes already deciding who she was. Divorced soccer mom. Midlife crisis. Another beginner trying to feel tough for a few weeks before quitting. She had seen those looks before in other cities. Other gyms. Other rooms full of loud men who mistook confidence for ability. Derek clapped his hands once. "All right," he announced to the class. "Looks like we got ourselves a new student." His tone carried the kind of false friendliness, designed to humiliate. "Maybe we should show her what real training looks like." Several students grinned immediately. Tyler stepped closer to Claire until only a few feet separated them. "You sure you want to do this?" he asked. "This place isn't exactly beginner-friendly." Claire adjusted the strap on her old gym bag slowly. "I'll manage." Tyler smirked wider. "That confidence won't last long." Then it happened. One of the larger students moving behind Claire deliberately slammed his shoulder into her hard enough to knock her sideways. Her bag slipped from her hand and hit the mat with a dull thud. A few students burst into laughter instantly. Nobody apologized. Nobody stepped forward to help. Derek didn't stop it. Tyler didn't hide his amusement. Claire steadied herself quietly and bent down to pick up the bag. Careful, the student mocked. Balance matters in karate. More laughter echoed through the dojo. But Claire didn't respond right away. Her fingers tightened slightly around the strap of the bag as she slowly stood back up. And for the first time since entering the building, something changed in her eyes. It was subtle, almost invisible, but if anyone there had known what real danger looked like, they would have recognized it immediately. Because beneath the calm expression and the quiet posture, Claire Bennett was no longer uncomfortable. She was assessing the room. The laughter lingered in the dojo long after Claire Bennett picked up her bag, but she no longer seemed to hear it. The fluorescent lights reflected faintly across the polished floor while the rain outside intensified, tapping harder against the tall windows like distant static. Around her, students returned to training with renewed energy, feeding off the humiliation they had just witnessed. Tyler Reed smirked as he wrapped his hands with fresh tape near the edge of the mat. "She is already thinking about leaving," he said loudly enough for half the room to hear. A few students laughed again. Claire quietly placed her bag beside the wall and removed her hoodie with calm, deliberate movements. Underneath, she wore a plain black athletic shirt with no logos, no branding, nothing flashy. Just simple clothes on a woman nobody considered threatening. Derek Vaughn watched her from across the room with narrowed eyes. Something about her composure bothered him. Most beginners either became defensive or embarrassed after being mocked publicly. Claire did neither. She simply observed, patiently, quietly, like someone studying patterns instead of emotions. "All right," Derek called out sharply. "Everyone circle up." The class gathered near the center mat, while Derek paced slowly in front of them with his hands behind his back. "Discipline matters here," he announced. "Control matters. Respect matters." Claire stood near the back of the group, unnoticed except when someone wanted another reason to smirk. Derek stopped walking and glanced toward her. "Sometimes people walk in thinking martial arts is a hobby," he continued. "But this place is earned." Tyler folded his arms proudly beside him. "Especially the advanced classes," he added. "We do not hand out respect for free." Claire remained silent. Derek suddenly pointed toward one of the younger female students. "Megan, front stance." The nervous teenager obeyed immediately. Derek corrected her foot position with exaggerated authority before turning toward Claire again. "You know what a front stance is?" he asked. Several students exchanged amused looks. Claire answered calmly, "Yes." Derek raised an eyebrow. "Show me." The room instantly quieted with anticipation. Claire stepped forward without hesitation and settled naturally into position. Her movement was smooth, balanced, effortless. The laughter disappeared for a brief second. Derek noticed it too. His expression tightened almost invisibly before Tyler quickly scoffed. "Beginner luck," he muttered. Derek circled around Claire slowly. "Not terrible," he admitted reluctantly. "But posture means nothing without pressure." He gestured toward a tall student named Ryan. "Help demonstrate." Ryan stepped forward eagerly, clearly enjoying the attention. Derek smirked slightly. "Light contact only," he instructed, though the tone in his voice suggested something very different. Claire understood immediately. Ryan raised his guard and moved toward her aggressively. Not enough to seriously hurt her, but enough to embarrass her in front of the room. Several students leaned forward expectantly. Tyler crossed his arms with a grin already forming. But the moment Ryan lunged forward, Claire shifted sideways with startling precision. It was not dramatic, not flashy, just one clean movement that redirected his momentum enough to force him off balance. Ryan stumbled awkwardly before catching himself near the edge of the mat. Silence flickered across the room for half a heartbeat. Derek's eyes narrowed immediately. Tyler's grin faded. Claire calmly stepped back into place as though nothing unusual had happened. "Lucky timing," Ryan muttered quickly, embarrassed by the stumble. A few students laughed nervously, eager to restore the mood. But Derek continued staring at Claire, watching more carefully now, measuring her. Claire lowered her eyes respectfully, though inside her chest something old had already begun to wake up. The sounds of the dojo faded slightly around her. The punching bags, the laughter, the fluorescent hum overhead. Her breathing slowed instinctively, controlled, familiar. Somewhere deep in the back of her memory, Another training room flickered into existence. Different walls, different instructors, different stakes. And for the first time that evening, Derek Vaughn unknowingly stopped looking at Claire Bennett like a joke and started looking at her like a problem. The atmosphere inside Iron Crest Martial Arts Academy shifted after Ryan lost his balance. It was subtle at first, almost invisible beneath the noise of training and forced laughter, but Derek Vaughn felt it immediately. Control inside a dojo depended on perception, and for the first time that evening, the students were no longer completely certain about the quiet woman standing near the edge of the mat. Derek hated uncertainty. Again, he ordered sharply. Ryan straightened himself quickly, embarrassed by what had just happened. A faint redness spread across his face while a few students avoided eye contact to hide their amusement. Claire remained calm, her posture relaxed, her breathing steady. She did not look proud. She did not look nervous. Somehow, that made the room even more uncomfortable. Ryan stepped forward again, this time slower, more cautious. Derek folded his arms tightly across his chest. "Do not overthink it," he snapped. "She just got lucky." Claire heard the irritation hiding beneath his words. Tyler Reed noticed it too. His smirk slowly returned as he moved closer to the mat. "You know what?" Tyler said loudly. "Maybe we should test how much luck she really has." Several students immediately leaned in with interest. Claire said nothing. Tyler pointed toward the center of the room. "You came here to train, right? Then train." Derek remained silent for a moment. The fluorescent lights reflected sharply across the polished floor, while rainwater rolled down the windows behind them in crooked silver lines. Finally, Derek nodded once. "Light sparring round," he announced. "Controlled movement only." The students quickly formed a loose circle around the mat. Some looked excited. Others looked uncomfortable now. Claire quietly stepped toward the center without argument. Tyler grinned as though he had already won something. "Do not worry," he mocked. "We will go easy on you." Claire lifted her eyes toward him calmly. "I would appreciate that." Her voice carried no sarcasm, no fear. Somehow that irritated Tyler even more. Derek tossed Ryan a pair of sparring gloves before looking directly at Claire. "You sure about this?" he asked. "Nobody is forcing you." But everyone in the room knew that was not true. The pressure hanging over the dojo had already become impossible to ignore. Claire glanced briefly around the circle of watching students. Some expected entertainment. Some expected humiliation. One younger girl near the back looked genuinely worried for her. Claire recognized that expression immediately. She had seen it years ago in other training facilities where confidence mattered more than kindness. "It is fine," Claire answered quietly. Derek stepped back. "Begin." Ryan moved first, eager to recover his pride. His footwork was fast, aggressive, showy, designed more for the audience than effectiveness. Claire barely moved at all. She watched, calculated, waited. The room fell strangely quiet, except for the squeak of movement across the mat. Ryan advanced again with another quick combination meant to pressure her backward, but Claire shifted sideways smoothly, creating just enough distance to avoid contact without appearing dramatic. A few students exchanged confused glances. Derek's jaw tightened slightly. Tyler's smile began fading again. Ryan pushed forward harder now, frustrated by how easily she kept reading his movements. Claire continued retreating calmly with minimal effort, her balance never breaking, her breathing never changing. Then Ryan overcommit slightly during a forward step. It was a tiny mistake. Most people in the room never even noticed it happen. Claire did. Instantly. Her hand redirected his momentum with controlled precision, and Ryan stumbled awkwardly past her before catching himself against the edge of the mat again. This time nobody laughed. The silence arrived too fast, too complete. Derek slowly lowered his arms. Tyler stared openly now. Claire stepped back into neutral position while Ryan turned around in disbelief, breathing heavier than before. "What the hell was that?" One student whispered under his breath. Claire lowered her eyes respectfully again, but inside her mind old instincts were returning faster now. Timing, distance, patience, control, skills buried beneath years of silence and ordinary living. Derek Vaughn suddenly realized something deeply unsettling. Claire Bennett was not reacting like a beginner trying to survive her first sparring session. She was reacting like someone deliberately holding back. The tension inside Iron Crest Martial Arts Academy no longer felt playful. What had started as entertainment was slowly turning into something far more uncomfortable, and everyone in the room could feel it. Ryan stepped away from the mat, breathing harder than before, while confusion spread visibly across his face. He was younger, stronger, faster on paper, yet somehow every attempt to pressure Claire Bennett ended the same way. She never appeared rushed, never panicked, never lost balance. Derek Vaughn noticed the students whispering now. Tiny conversations, side glances, questions forming behind their eyes. And in a place built entirely on reputation, questions were dangerous. Tyler Reed walked onto the mat before Derek could say anything else. "All right," Tyler announced loudly, forcing a grin back onto his face. "Class is over. I think our guest got lucky twice." A few students laughed weakly, though the sound lacked confidence now. Claire stepped back politely toward the edge of the mat. "Thank you for letting me train," she said calmly. Tyler's expression hardened immediately. He hated the way she spoke. Quiet, respectful, completely unaffected. "You think this was training?" he asked. Claire paused. "I assumed it was." Several students looked away to hide sudden smiles. Derek caught it instantly. Tyler caught it too. Embarrassment flashed across Tyler's face before pride quickly replaced it. "You got jokes now?" he snapped. Claire shook her head once. "No." But Tyler was no longer listening. The room had shifted against him, even slightly, and arrogant men often became cruelest the moment they sensed control slipping away. He stepped closer to Claire until only inches separated them. "You keep acting calm like you know something," he muttered. "But all I see is somebody pretending." Claire remained still. "I am not pretending." Tyler laughed sharply. "Then prove it." Derek finally stepped forward. "Enough," he said coldly. But there was calculation behind his eyes now. He no longer wanted the situation to stop. He wanted answers. "Maybe one more round," Derek said slowly. "Just to clear things up." Claire looked toward him quietly. The fluorescent lights overhead buzzed faintly while rain continued sliding down the dark windows outside. The younger students watched silently now, no longer amused. Something about the atmosphere felt heavier, more serious. Tyler rolled his shoulders aggressively before grabbing a fresh pair of gloves from the bench. "You wanted to train," he said. "Now train for real." Claire glanced briefly toward the exit doors. For a moment, it looked like she might leave. Honestly, Derek hoped she would. Because deep down, something about Claire Bennett had begun unsettling him in ways he could not explain. It was not just her movement. It was the restraint. Experienced fighters often carried ego like a second skin. Claire carried caution, the kind built from hard lessons and dangerous places. "I do not want trouble," Claire said quietly. Tyler smirked immediately. "That sounds like fear." Claire's eyes lifted toward him slowly. Calm, focused, unreadable. "No," she answered softly. "It is experience." The room went silent again. Derek felt a strange chill crawl into the back of his neck. Tyler only laughed louder. "Experience?" he mocked. "Doing what?" "Yoga retreats." A few nervous chuckles spread through the crowd, but nobody sounded fully comfortable anymore. Claire lowered her eyes briefly, almost like she regretted speaking at all. Then Tyler made his mistake. He shoved one of the spare gloves hard against her chest with enough force to make several students flinch. "Put them on," he ordered, "or admit you do not belong here." Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The dojo had become completely still except for the distant rain tapping against glass and the faint hum of the overhead lights. Claire stared down at the gloves in her hands for several long seconds. Then slowly, very slowly, she slipped them on. And somewhere deep beneath the quiet woman everyone thought they understood, something cold and disciplined finally finished waking up. Claire Bennett tightened the straps on the gloves slowly while every student inside the dojo watched her in complete silence. The earlier laughter had disappeared entirely now, replaced by something heavier. Uncertainty. Tyler Reed bounced lightly on the balls of his feet near the center of the mat, rolling his shoulders with exaggerated confidence while a crooked grin stretched across his face. He still believed this was his moment. Derek Vaughn stood near the edge of the training floor with his arms folded tightly across his chest, but his expression no longer carried amusement. Something deep in his instincts had started warning him that the situation was moving in a direction he could no longer fully control. Claire stepped forward calmly. No dramatic posture. No intimidation. Just quiet readiness. Tyler laughed under his breath. "You finally look nervous," he Mocked. Claire glanced toward him once. No, she answered softly. I just remembered something. Tyler smirked. Yeah? What is that? For the first time all evening, Claire hesitated before speaking. The fluorescent lights reflected faintly in her eyes while the rain outside softened into a low, steady rhythm against the windows. Why I stopped doing this, she said quietly. Something about the way she said it made Derek's stomach tighten instantly. Tyler either did not notice or did not care. Good, he replied. You can remember it again on your way home. Several students shifted uncomfortably now. Even the younger fighters sensed the atmosphere changing. Claire slowly raised her guard position, and the movement was so natural, so controlled, that Derek felt a chill crawl through his chest. It was not beginner technique. It was not recreational training. It was muscle memory refined through years of repetition under pressure most people would never survive. And suddenly Derek understood why her balance never broke, why her breathing stayed calm, why her eyes kept scanning exits, distances, angles, and movement patterns the moment she entered the room. Claire was not learning how to fight. Claire had spent years trying not to. Tyler stepped closer aggressively. You know what your problem is? He asked loudly enough for the class to hear. People spent your whole life letting you think you were tougher than you are. Claire did not answer. But deep inside her mind, another room had already returned. Different walls, different lights, the sharp scent of concrete and sweat instead of polished wood. Men shouting instructions over the sound of heavy boots striking the ground. Younger Claire standing in military gray training gear, while instructors circled like predators waiting for weakness. Faster. Again. Control your breathing. Do not hesitate. The memories hit hard and fast beneath her calm expression. 15 years earlier, Claire Bennett had not been a quiet woman searching for a small-town dojo. She had been one of the most respected close-quarters combat instructors inside a specialized military training program that officially did not exist on paper. She trained soldiers before overseas deployment, federal teams, high-risk response units, men twice her size who stopped underestimating her exactly 1 second after training began. But none of those people had ever laughed at her, because the truly dangerous world had taught a brutal lesson very quickly. Arrogance got people hurt. Claire left that life after one operation overseas ended with casualties she still saw in nightmares. Since then, she had buried every piece of herself connected to violence beneath ordinary routines and quiet living. Small apartment, office job, silence, safety. But standing inside Iron Crest now, surrounded by mocking voices and fragile egos, she could feel those old instincts waking up faster than she wanted. Tyler pointed toward the center mat impatiently. You ready or not? Claire blinked slowly, forcing the memories away. Her breathing steadied again. Calm returned across her face like still water settling after a storm. Then she looked directly at Tyler Reed for the first time without lowering her eyes afterward. And something inside him reacted immediately. A flicker of doubt. Tiny, barely visible, but real. Derek noticed it too. The room had gone so quiet that the faint buzzing from the overhead lights sounded strangely loud. Claire adjusted her stance one final time. Not aggressive, not emotional, just precise. Then she spoke in the same soft voice that had unsettled the room all evening. You should stop now, she said calmly. I am trying very hard to leave peacefully. For a brief moment after Claire Bennett spoke, nobody inside Iron Crest Martial Arts Academy moved at all. The rain outside had nearly stopped now, leaving only faint droplets sliding down the dark windows while the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead with cold mechanical steadiness. Tyler Reed stared at her with disbelief before laughing loudly enough to break the silence. Listen to her, he mocked, spreading his arms toward the class. She is threatening me now. A few students forced nervous smiles, but nobody laughed the way they had earlier. Something had changed too much. Claire remained still at the center of the mat, her breathing calm, her shoulders relaxed. She looked less like someone preparing for a fight and more like someone trying to prevent one. Derek Vaughn noticed it clearly now. Every instinct he had developed through decades of martial arts experience was screaming the same warning. Claire was not bluffing. Tyler stepped closer with visible irritation. You think you scare me? He asked. Claire answered honestly. I do not want to. The softness of her voice somehow made the tension worse. Tyler shook his head with a bitter grin. You know what your problem is? Nobody ever humbled you. Derek finally spoke. Tyler, His voice carried a sharp edge now. Tyler glanced back toward him. What? Derek hesitated. The smart decision would have been ending the session immediately, clearing the room, letting the woman walk out peacefully before pride pushed things further. But Derek had spent too many years protecting his reputation inside these walls. Too many students watching. Too much ego involved. And arrogance often disguises itself as authority right before disaster arrives. Keep it controlled, Derek said carefully. Tyler smirked immediately. Always. Claire lowered her eyes for one brief second, almost disappointed. Then Tyler moved forward fast. Not wildly. Not recklessly. Just aggressively enough to make a statement in front of the class. Several students instinctively leaned closer to watch. But the instant Tyler entered range, Claire shifted. Smooth. Efficient. Minimal. Her movement barely seemed real because there was no wasted energy anywhere inside it. One small angle change. One controlled redirection of momentum. Tyler suddenly lost balance and stumbled sharply past her before catching himself against the edge of the mat. Gasps spread across the dojo immediately. Tyler spun around in shock, breathing heavier now. Claire had not struck him, had not attacked him, yet somehow she controlled the entire exchange without effort. Derek's expression darkened. He recognized the technique instantly now. Not sport karate, not tournament sparring. This was something far more refined. Military-level movement built around efficiency instead of showmanship. Tyler's face flushed bright red from humiliation as several students whispered openly now. Again, he snapped angrily. Claire shook her head once. Please stop. Tyler lunged forward a second time. Faster now, driven entirely by wounded pride. Claire moved before he even fully committed. Her footwork was impossibly clean. One pivot. One shift in timing. One precise interruption of his forward momentum. Tyler suddenly dropped awkwardly onto one knee near the center of the mat, his glove slapping loudly against the floor as the entire dojo froze in disbelief. Nobody could process what they had just seen. Claire immediately stepped backward, creating distance instead of pressing advantage. Calm, controlled, respectful. Tyler looked up at her with genuine confusion for the first time all evening. Who are you? He asked breathlessly. Claire did not answer. Around the room, students stared openly now. The younger fighters no longer looked entertained. They looked stunned. One teenage boy near the back slowly lowered his phone without realizing it. Megan stood completely frozen with wide eyes. Derek Vaughn felt cold realization settling heavily into his chest. Claire Bennett had spent the entire evening protecting them from embarrassment. And the terrifying part was how easy she made it look. Tyler slowly rose back to his feet, but the arrogance that once filled his expression had started cracking apart. Claire adjusted her gloves quietly while looking toward the exit doors again. Still calm. Still trying to leave peacefully. But now the room finally understood something Derek should have realized the moment she walked inside. The quietest person in the dojo had been the most dangerous one there all along. Nobody inside Iron Crest Martial Arts Academy spoke after Tyler Reed stumbled backward for the second time. The silence felt unnatural now, thick enough to press against the walls themselves. Even the younger students who had laughed earlier stood motionless near the edge of the mat, staring at Claire Bennett with expressions that no longer carried amusement. They carried caution. Claire slowly removed one glove and flexed her fingers once, calm as ever. This should end here, she said quietly. Tyler's breathing remained uneven as humiliation burned across his face. For years inside this dojo, he had been the loudest voice in every room, the man newer students admired and feared. But now dozens of eyes were watching him lose control against a woman he mocked less than 30 minutes earlier. Pride can survive many things. Public embarrassment is rarely one of them. No, Tyler snapped suddenly. You do not get to walk away acting superior. Derek Vaughn took a step forward immediately. Tyler. But Tyler ignored him completely. The frustration in his face had hardened into desperation now. You think because you dodged around a little that you proved something? He shouted. Claire slipped the glove back on slowly. I proved nothing, she answered calmly. You chose this. The words landed harder than shouting ever could. A few students lowered their eyes immediately. Derek felt tension tightening across his shoulders. He recognized the danger now, not because Claire looked angry, but because she did not. Truly dangerous people rarely lose emotional control. They simply decide when enough is enough. Tyler stepped forward again, faster than before, abandoning technique entirely in favor of aggression fueled by humiliation. Several students gasped quietly. Claire exhaled once. Then everything happened almost too quickly for the room to process. She shifted sideways with perfect timing, redirecting Tyler's momentum before he could recover balance. One controlled movement interrupted his forward pressure completely. Another small adjustment collapsed his stance. Tyler suddenly found himself lowered onto the mat in a restrained position he could not escape without risking injury to himself. The entire exchange lasted maybe 3 seconds. No dramatic strikes. No excessive force. Just terrifying precision. The room froze. Completely. Tyler stared at the floor in stunned disbelief, while Claire maintained full control without visible effort. Her breathing never changed. Her posture remained relaxed. One of the younger students accidentally dropped a water bottle near the wall, and the sound echoed loudly through the silence. Derek Vaughn felt his stomach sink. He recognized the restraint technique immediately now. Military close-quarters control. High-level defensive systems designed to neutralize threats quickly without unnecessary harm. Techniques almost nobody outside specialized training environments ever learned correctly. Claire released Tyler the instant he stopped resisting and stepped backward immediately, creating distance again instead of humiliating him further. Tyler remained kneeling on the mat, breathing hard while confusion and shock spread across his face. Nobody laughed now. Nobody moved. Megan whispered softly from the back of the room. How did she do that? Derek did not answer because he already knew the truth was far worse than anyone there realized. Claire Bennett had not shown them her full ability. Not even close. She had spent the entire evening limiting herself to the bare minimum necessary to protect everyone involved, especially Tyler. Claire removed both gloves carefully and placed them on the mat. I told you to stop, she said quietly. Tyler slowly looked up at her, and for the first time since the evening began, there was no arrogance left in his eyes. Only realization. Claire picked up her old gym bag and slid the strap over her shoulder. The fluorescent lights hummed softly overhead while rainwater continued dripping outside somewhere beyond the dark windows. Nobody attempted to block her path now. Nobody mocked her clothes. Nobody smirked anymore. Derek watched her approach the exit doors with a heavy feeling settling into his chest because he finally understood the full truth. Iron Crest had spent years teaching confidence to loud men who mistook intimidation for strength. But Claire Bennett came from a world where real strength moved quietly, avoided attention, and only revealed itself when absolutely necessary. And tonight, for a few unforgettable seconds, that world had walked straight through his dojo. Claire Bennett reached the front doors of Iron Crest Martial Arts Academy just as the rain outside finally began to slow into a light mist. Her hand rested briefly on the metal handle while complete silence filled the dojo behind her. Nobody returned to training. Nobody even seemed to breathe normally anymore. Tyler Reed remained near the center mat, still trying to process what had happened in front of the entire class. The confidence that once filled his expression had vanished completely, replaced by the hollow look of a man realizing he had misunderstood someone from the very beginning. Claire could feel every eye in the room following her now, but unlike earlier, those stares carried no mockery. Only questions. Derek Vaughn slowly stepped forward. Wait, he said. Claire paused, but did not turn around immediately. Derek swallowed carefully, suddenly aware that his voice no longer carried the authority it once did. Who trained you? He asked quietly. The question lingered heavily in the room. Claire closed her eyes for one brief second before answering. A long time ago, she said softly. Derek shook his head slowly. No, he replied. That was not hobby training. That was not tournament karate. Claire finally turned toward him. Her calm expression remained unchanged, but something tired rested behind her eyes now. The kind of exhaustion that comes from carrying memories nobody else can see. One older man standing near the back of the dojo suddenly stepped forward before Claire could answer. His name was Walter Hayes, a retired Marine Corps veteran who occasionally attended evening classes for conditioning and mobility work. He had remained quiet most of the night, watching more carefully than everyone else. Now his face looked pale. I know those movements, Walter said slowly. The room turned toward him immediately. Walter kept staring at Claire with growing disbelief. No wasted motion. No emotional reaction. Full control without escalation. He shook his head once. That is military. Claire looked down briefly, but said nothing. Derek's expression tightened further. Military, Tyler repeated weakly. Walter nodded without taking his eyes off Claire. Not standard military either, he added quietly. Specialized close-quarters training. The room fell silent again. Several students exchanged stunned looks while pieces of the evening suddenly rearranged themselves inside their minds. The calm breathing, the awareness, the restraint, the way Claire avoided hurting anyone even when pressured repeatedly. Megan spoke softly from the back. You were in the military? Claire hesitated for several seconds. Then she answered in the quietest voice anyone had heard all night. For a while. Walter exhaled sharply through his nose as realization settled fully across his face. My God, he muttered. That explains it. Tyler stared at Claire like he no longer recognized the woman he mocked earlier. Why did you not say anything, he asked. Claire looked toward him calmly. Because I did not come here to impress anyone. Nobody had a response to that. Derek Vaughn suddenly felt ashamed in a way he had not experienced in years. Not because Claire embarrassed his dojo, but because she never tried to. Every opportunity to dominate the situation had been placed directly in front of her, and every single time, she chose restraint instead. Meanwhile, the people claiming to teach discipline had spent the evening humiliating a stranger for entertainment. Derek lowered his eyes briefly. You warned us, he admitted quietly. Claire adjusted the strap on her bag again. Several times. The fluorescent lights reflected softly across the polished floor, while rainwater dripped steadily outside the entrance. Walter continued staring at her with a mixture of respect and disbelief. People with your background usually do not walk into places like this, he said carefully. Claire gave the faintest hint of a sad smile. That is exactly why I did. Nobody understood what she meant at first. Then Derek realized the truth hidden inside her words. Claire Bennett had not entered Iron Crest searching for conflict. She came searching for peace. A quiet place to train again. A normal life. Maybe even belonging. And within minutes, the people inside that dojo turned her into a target simply because she looked ordinary. Claire slowly opened the door as cool evening air drifted into the room. Before stepping outside, she paused one final time. The dangerous people are rarely the loud ones, she said softly. They are usually the ones trying hardest not to become dangerous again. Then she walked into the rain while the entire dojo stood frozen behind her, silently realizing they had just witnessed the difference between ego and true strength. The rain had stopped completely by the time Claire Bennett reached the far end of the parking lot. Water still shimmered across the black asphalt beneath the streetlights while cold evening air drifted quietly through the empty spaces between parked cars. Behind her, the doors of Iron Crest Martial Arts Academy remained open, but nobody followed. Nobody called her name. Inside the dojo, students still stood frozen exactly where she left them, struggling to process the reality that had unfolded in front of their eyes. Tyler Reed sat alone near the edge of the mat with his elbows resting on his knees, staring silently at the floor. For the first time in years, he looked small inside his own dojo. Derek Vaughn slowly walked toward the center of the room while the fluorescent lights hummed overhead. The framed tournament photos lining the walls suddenly felt meaningless to him now. Decades of trophies, championships, demonstrations. And yet the strongest person who had ever stepped onto those mats arrived wearing old sneakers and a faded hoodie while asking politely for a place to train. Derek looked around at his students carefully. Nobody was speaking. Nobody was smiling anymore. The atmosphere inside Iron Crest had completely changed. Megan finally broke the silence first. She never tried to embarrass anybody, she said quietly. Derek lowered his eyes. No, he admitted. We embarrassed ourselves. The words landed heavily across the room. Several students shifted uncomfortably while replaying the evening inside their minds. The jokes, the smirks, the mocking comments about Claire's age, clothes, and appearance. Every cruel moment now sounded uglier than before. Walter Hayes leaned against the wall near the back of the dojo, still staring toward the open doorway where Claire disappeared moments earlier. I served with men who trained like that, he said quietly. The calm ones were always the most dangerous. Tyler finally looked up. Why? He asked weakly. Walter's eyes narrowed slightly. Because they understood consequences. Silence. Returned again. Derek slowly exhaled through his nose while something uncomfortable settled inside his chest. Shame. Not because he lost authority in front of his students, but because Claire Bennett showed more discipline, restraint, and control than anyone teaching inside his academy. She had every reason to humiliate Tyler publicly after the way he treated her. Instead, she protected him from real embarrassment at every opportunity. Derek walked toward the front windows overlooking the parking lot. Claire's old sedan started quietly beneath a flickering streetlight before slowly pulling away into the night. No dramatic exit. No revenge speech. No need for recognition. She simply left, just as quietly as she arrived. What kind of person walks away from proving they're the strongest one in the room? One student whispered softly. Walter answered without hesitation. Someone who already knows they do not need to prove it. The room fell silent once more. Outside, Claire drove through the wet streets of the small town with both hands resting calmly on the steering wheel while distant headlights reflected across the windshield. Her expression remained peaceful now, though exhaustion lingered behind her eyes. The old instincts she spent years burying had surfaced again tonight, and part of her hated that. But another part understood something important. She had not become dangerous inside that dojo. She had remained disciplined despite every reason not to. And that difference mattered more than anyone there realized. Back inside Iron Crest, Derek finally turned toward his students. Class dismissed, he said quietly. Nobody moved right away. The younger fighters looked thoughtful now instead of confident. Tyler removed his gloves slowly before placing them carefully beside the mat where Claire had stood earlier. His arrogance was gone, replaced by something far more valuable. Humility. Derek stared at the empty center of the dojo for several long seconds before speaking one final time. Remember this feeling, he told the class. Because strength without humility becomes weakness faster than most people understand. Nobody argued. Nobody laughed. The room stayed, completely still beneath the fluorescent lights, while rainwater continued dripping softly outside into the dark. And somewhere beyond those quiet streets, Claire Bennett disappeared into the night exactly the same way truly dangerous people often do. Calm, unnoticed, and carrying far more power than the world ever suspects.